Startup Grind is a Google for Entrepreneurs brand. The format is a monthly recurring educational series designed to educate and inspire and inform entrepreneurs, both aspiring as well as current entrepreneurs. The centerpiece is a fireside chat, kind of a candid, no holds barred conversation with a founder or VC or a CXO from the startup community, preferably local. And it is designed to add some reality and realism to the romanticism of the startup world. There's a lot of kind of sexiness and romanticism in the startup world, and it's usually not like that, not like what you see on TV and not like what's on Silicon Valley, which many of you can probably relate to. We'll call it founder therapy, to come and hear somebody talk about their grind and some of the things that you guys are probably wrestling with as well as hearing some insights in what's working, what's not working. We do have a number of sponsors I want to make sure and thank. Zoozler is a company here that does it's a technology company that does websites, tech apps, kind of specializing on high-tech stuff, VR, AR, that kind of thing. They have a very interesting new program called Zoozler Tech Lab, which helps startups that helps idea and early stage founders to get their ideas to market by helping to build MVPs very affordably, as well as a venture network, which actually gives founders access to capital throughout the process. So definitely check that out. Paul Powers is here, who's the CEO, so definitely if you want to learn more about that. Olivia is also from Zoozler here. Is there any other Zoozler folks here? So Paul or Olivia, or step back to the table and grab a brochure or check them out, Zoozler.com. Tech Lab is the one specifically startup focused. We also have the Garage Group. Jason Hauer is here. Garage Group helps big cos innovate like startups. Big cos like Nike and Procter. Their business is exploding because there is such a big need for big cos and such a desire for them to innovate like startups. So they are doing well. They're also hiring. Actually, Zoozler's hiring as well. So if you're looking to get plugged in, both of those guys are hiring. Great companies to work for. Who else? Also, before I get to Centrifuge, Startup Weekend, I'll do a shout out to them. They're probably going to do, I think, a spring event. They used to do a spring event and a fall event, so you'll probably hear more about that. It's a weekend-long startup event where you get together with teams and basically build a startup over the weekend. And then last but not least, Centrifuge, Harris Media. Harris is, Rudy Harris, provides video and does not charge us, so we really appreciate him. If you have any video needs, he would love to talk to you because they do some fantastic stuff. You can check out their website for some of their samples. Very, very much appreciate their help. And then last but not least, Centrifuge, helping us with giving us this space. And I'll give a shout out for Startup Cincy. BK is going to share just a real quick bit about Startup Cincy and what he's doing with Startup Cincy.
Awesome, man. Well, congratulations on joining or becoming a part of the tech community here in Cincinnati. My name is BK Simmons, and I am the community catalyst for Startup Cincy. Startup Cincy is the ecosystem and the renaissance that's happening here in Cincinnati that's booming through tech and entrepreneurship, through the creative community, engineers and techies alike. And so we want you to feel welcome here. You're in a $17 million project called Union Hall, which just opened up doors 2 years ago. So this is a co-working space. It houses the Brandery, which is an accelerator program, Cincy Tech, which is a fund and the namesake fund within Cincinnati, and also Centrifuge, which is a membership organization that supports startups and early growth companies to get access to customers, to get access to talent, and access to funding. So all these resources are afforded to you right here within Union Hall, but we want everybody to feel like they're part of Startup Cincy. So feel free to reach out at www.startupcincy.com and be sure to hashtag Startup Cincy throughout the night, and whenever you're out in the community doing tech and entrepreneurial stuff, we always be giving away like t-shirts and really cool swag, but happy to have you.
Thanks, BK. All right, last but not least, before we get rolling here, next month, so we do this every month. We've got, actually have everybody, folks locked up until May, so we'll be, as time goes on, we'll be announcing who those will be. I just put a teaser on social this morning who March would be. Yeah, March speaker. Any guesses? I don't know if you saw that. What's it? What is it? Mark Cuban. You know, he couldn't come because of that thing that he. Yeah, next year. We're on his list. Trust me, for real. Not really. But no, this guy lived and worked on 3 different continents, has executive level experience at 3 different big cos, and then jumped in a few years back into the startup scene. We're proud to welcome Scott Weiss, who is the CEO of Ocean Accelerator and Unpolished. Great backstory, not only about the corporate life, but also has some great expertise from advising. I think he advises 4 different startups, has deep knowledge on equity markets, and it's just an all-around high integrity, high caliber, good dude. Speaking of which, tonight we are welcoming Rod Robinson. Rod is with ConnXus, founder and CEO of ConnXus, and I'm going to do a terrible job at this. I'm going to have him clean this up when he gets up here, but ConnXus is a diversity supplier platform that helps Fortune 500 companies to stay on track and stay out of trouble with with the diversity, and overall to advance diversity in the workplace, which I think we can all agree is much needed. So we'll look forward to catching up, getting into that with Rod. I first heard his story. I think it was FounderCon. I think he did a talk, and it just really resonated with me as a former corporate guy. He's a former corporate guy, big co guy, and hearing about his journey to the startup world, and hearing him talking about, I'm kind of stealing his thunder, what we'll get into today, but he's got a family. He's not a guy who's launching a company straight out of college. There's anything wrong with that, but he's balancing 4 kids, right? 4 kids and a lovely wife, and we'll get into that, but it just really resonated with me and felt like it was a good story that the community would want to hear. So give a Startup Grind welcome to Rod Robinson. Thanks for being here, man.
Hey, my pleasure.
Good to see you. Process check, I do not have a watch. So Olivia, could you give me hand signals when
keep you on task.
Keep me on task. Yeah, maybe at a halfway point if we're not already there. Give me a holler. So how we usually do these talks is we talk a little bit about history and background, and you'd even get into the childhood and college years, and then talk about sort of current day challenges, and then we break it into the last third is insights, future stuff, where things are going. That's how we kind of break it up. So, sure. But to start off, we always like to learn a little more about you. I mean, this conversation is all about you. So, well, I guess first of all, we'll do some things like I know you've got a lovely wife. How was your Valentine's Day? You guys do anything fun for Valentine's Day? Or?
Actually, we cooked for each other.
Oh, nice. Very good.
We cooked for each other. So, actually,
what'd you make?
I like to cook.
Yeah.
In my spare time. Love to grill, but I'm into this new method of cooking called sous vide. New for me anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sure people may have heard of it. So I've been kind of using a combination of the sous vide method, but instead of finishing it like the steak on the stove,
very precise, right?
I've been putting it on the grill to finish it, or I actually have a torch that I use to finish them as well.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
So I like to expand my horizons in the kitchen, either outdoor or indoor. So
no, that's very cool.
Grew up in a restaurant family. Actually, my family owned restaurants down in Florida.
Oh,
so
gotcha. Well, we'll plug in that. So let's get into that. So kind of taking a trip down memory lane there. Tell us about Rod as a kid. What were you like? Kid to middle school, high school. Was there any kind of foreshadowing of entrepreneurship or that kind of a thing? We'd love to, take us through that.
Yeah. So my childhood, actually, it was interesting. My childhood was not like many of us. I don't think anyone is born in a perfect situation.
Yeah.
So I actually was born to 2 teenage parents. My parents were married. I was born when they were both 19, so they were divorced by the time I was 2.
Gotcha.
So I actually lived in probably 5 different households by the time I was 11, until I settled with my father, my stepmother. And so that was an interesting point in my life as I look back on it, on what motivates me. And I think the fact that I was raised by, during that span of time, by my grandmother, aunts, and uncles, one of the things that drove me was not letting them down. So the time that I took away from my family's family, that was that additional motivation. But I think some of the things that I was fortunate that education was highly emphasized in my family. And so I had a lot of role models in terms of, maybe you didn't have a lot of money, but we had values. And I think that makes a difference. And so I think that my escape oftentimes was reading about entrepreneurs.
Gotcha.
So I really
do that?
enjoyed reading, having my grandfather owned a restaurant, which turned into a couple restaurants, and sort of working there and sort of learning about hard work and the pains and the joys of entrepreneurship, kind of at that level.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the early catalyst of my desire to pursue
Gotcha.
entrepreneurship. I didn't know it at the time, but
Yeah,
as it turned
it's
out.
interesting how you can look back on events and see now with the lens that you have right now, right?
Yeah.
But cool. So before we get too deep into the back history, tell us. I told a little bit, probably a pretty weak version of what ConnXus does, but just to give us some context.
Yeah.
Talk about ConnXus. What does it do? Why do you do it?
Yeah.
Tell us a little about the business.
So essentially ConnXus, and you did a pretty good job of describing what we do.
Thank you.
Essentially, we're a supplier relationship management platform. So big companies have a lot of suppliers that they do business with, and oftentimes the focus is on the transaction itself. So just given my background as kind of worked out of business school in supply chain and procurement, ultimately became a Chief Procurement Officer of a large company. And so one of the opportunities I saw in sort of supplier management was that there was so much focus on just completing the transaction. There wasn't enough focus around tracking demographic data, spend data that integrated in typical ERP platforms that enable companies to quickly put their hands on valid data to report for compliance reasons, how much they're spending with minority-owned businesses, with women-owned businesses, understanding more about suppliers multiple levels down in their network. So, not just that I'm doing business with Todd, but what suppliers is Todd doing business with that are relative to my supply chain. And so really it's a platform that enables companies to build more inclusive, transparent, and compliant supplier networks. So supplier diversity was really kind of the wedge to get us, sort of in the door, because you don't want to go and create a procurement platform that out of the gate competes with Ariba and SAP and Oracle. But by focusing on this problem of supplier diversity, where a lot of companies, for reasons, maybe they do business with the government, maybe they have contractual mandates, there are a lot of drivers that drive the need for what we provide. But essentially what we've done is we solved that specific problem, but in the meantime we started building features and functionality that just created a damn good supplier management system.
Right.
And so what's happened is
Clearly.
customers who initially started using us to solve that specific problem has actually helped us expand our model such that now we're managing all suppliers for many of our customers. And
Not just diversity, but
all suppliers, because
That's awesome.
that's just another data point, right? And if you look at a database of suppliers, you can tag them. You can have this universe of suppliers. All we're doing is we're validating the data.
Yeah.
So we're augmenting the existing data set to include third-party data about these suppliers, and we're serving it up in a dashboard.
Gotcha.
So that's really what's been kind of the key driver of our growth over the past few years.
Gotcha.
Revenue has been doubling, and we've raised a lot of money. And obviously, easy to say it now, but obviously there were a lot of struggles along the way.
Yeah.
But,
we're gonna dig into those. So, yeah.
But that's really the sort of the nature of what we do. So really, we're a procurement platform and help companies better manage their suppliers.
Gotcha. No, thank you. And a little bit out of turn, but I wanted to just have that context so people could understand what ConnXus was. So again, more about the background. You're a family guy, so tell us. I mean, and just more of the human interest stuff. Tell us about your family, man.
Sure. So I've been married. Actually, my wife and I will celebrate 25 years.
Congrats.
So I got married I got married at 5, right?
5, yeah, nice. Arranged marriage, right?
4 kids. My oldest is 22, and
Cool.
she will graduate from Savannah College of Art and Design this May, and we'll see what she ends up doing.
Yeah,
she's very creative.
Nice.
And then my son, I have a 19-year-old son who is at UC, freshman at UC, and he's majoring in business, accounting specifically. And then I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I have a 7-year-old son. So they keep us very busy.
Yeah, I bet.
So I started this business. I actually started the company, incorporated in 2010. We did not start generating revenue until 2013. And so it's interesting, my son, as he graduated from high school last year, it was interesting because I said, man, it's interesting. He was actually, in high school when I started this, and I thought about my youngest who, he was just starting high school, or actually he was in middle school, but my youngest was like 1, when I started. So it's really interesting when I think about.
Puts it in perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I was insane because I didn't even stop to think when I started it that I would have 2 kids in college at the same time. So it's quite risky when you think about it. And they don't know it, but I actually put their college funds at risk.
Gotcha.
So fortunately things paid off, but those are things you have to do.
Those are not easy decisions.
Yeah, and I look back, and I look back on that. My wife and I sometimes we reflect back, and I'm thinking, man, I guess I must have been insane, to do that. But I guess as I think about it, I said, worst case scenario, if this thing, if it tanks, I can always go back and get a job.
Yeah.
I always left my old jobs on good terms, so I could, I would have to swallow my pride and go back, right?
Right.
But
Sure.
it worked so far.
Yeah,
It's worked out.
So far, it's panning out
Yeah.
good. So, get more of the human interest. I know that you're a pretty big cigar and bourbon aficionado. Share with us your best cigar experience in terms of the cigar, the venue or location, and the company that you're with. What's the best cigar event you had?
Well,
experience you had.
Well, let me tell you how I first got into cigars.
There you go.
My first cigar experience was, I actually majored in accounting, so right out of college, I went to, I worked for Deloitte, and so I was an auditor, and I actually worked on an audit in Puerto Rico. So that was one of my early engagements at Deloitte. And so worked on this I was flying back and forth to Puerto Rico every week. And at the end of this kind of 9-week audit, we had this dinner, and so the partners on the project were, they're from Cuba originally, but they lived in Puerto Rico and worked out of that office. And so after dinner, I'm 21 years old. I mean, barely able to drink, and so they're picking wine and everything with dinner, and then we had like after dinner drinks, and then all of a sudden this. I guess, well, I know it's now a humidor passed around,
Right.
and we were supposed to pick a cigar. So I'm like, man, what do I do? I'm not even gonna pretend I know what the heck I'm doing. So someone picked a cigar for me, and so lit it up, and almost choked to death. And fortunately, it was a high quality cigar, and I remembered that experience. And then didn't really smoke any cigars after that. But it was when I became an executive here, just my kind of path here was Cincinnati Bell recruited me. I worked for Accenture. Cincinnati Bell was a client. I was a supply chain specialist, and they recruited me to run procurement at Cincinnati Bell. So that's what brought me to Cincinnati. And so early in my start at Cincinnati Bell, our CEO at the time, Jack Cassidy, took me out. We went to Jeff Ruby's. And so
Nice.
After dinner, he wanted to hang out and smoke cigars. And I think Jeff Ruby even maybe joined us. And so at the time, I said, you know what? I got to make sure.
The owner.
Now I'll pick the same cigar that I got in Puerto Rico.
There you go.
This was probably this was probably 10, 11 years ago. So I picked the same cigar that I had back in Puerto Rico, which was a Hemingway. It was a Romeo and Juliet. And so I actually smoked it without choking. And
Nice.
I actually got to
Put
actually
up some
taste
tolerance.
it and, really appreciated that experience. And then from there, I think frequently going out with Jack and others,
Yeah, yeah.
I sort of got into cigars and, one thing led to another, got to taste more. And so now I have a tower humidor in my basement and I collect cigars and I probably got enough cigars to last a lifetime.
Yeah.
That's just
Gotcha.
one of my hobbies.
Just in case there's a zombie apocalypse,
Yep.
he'll be good to go from a cigar standpoint, right?
And I get gifts, so it's great.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that my friend Kathy, next time she goes to Cuba or overseas, she'll
There
bring
you
me
go.
back.
Very cool. That's great. So you alluded to Cincy Bell and your life in Bigco. So take us through the journey from your work there to starting ConnXus. Not only the kind of the steps along the way, but the thought process along the way. What did you have the idea there working at Cincinnati Bell? Was it something that was an idea first, or just the desire to get out and do something on your own and finding the idea later? Tell us kind of how.
Yeah.
that
So
trajectory.
this idea had really been percolating in my head for a while, and was really as we started to get a lot of requests. Like just in my role as Chief Procurement Officer, had responsibility for all corporate procurement, and we were really centralizing procurement and standardizing, and we just had there was a lot of compliance that we had to do because telecom is regulated, and so we had various constituents where we had to report. We had to actually make contractual commitments, not only to government entities, but also to customers like P&G. They basically said, you will commit to this percentage and you will report to us on a quarterly basis or monthly basis or an annual basis. And so it was that was part of the catalyst, and then spending resources, people, money, chasing down spreadsheets and doing a lot of manual work to report this data. And so that was kind of one of the drivers. And then there was also, I was involved in organizations where I felt that like these organizations were set up to help sort of advance the cause of increased diversity in supply chain, but I didn't really see the investment in technology keeping up with sort of the objectives.
Sure.
And so then I was also looking at other tools that could actually help to streamline this process that I was facing and a lot of my colleagues were facing. And I just didn't find a lot, so, we were using pieces of what Dun & Bradstreet provides to do data validation. And then I had suppliers, I had an analyst who would create spreadsheet templates and then we would send them out to suppliers, but then they would put the data in and we'd have to, collate it and roll it up. So I just I said, man, if there was something that would actually do all this stuff, and then as you're collecting all this data, you're also collecting data on new suppliers because you're getting exposed to suppliers kind of down. I call them Nexus suppliers, kind of that next level down. Then
Gotcha.
you could actually create a database that would be valuable. And if you're able to aggregate bids by all the buyers who are using it, like all those suppliers that you're collecting from, if you created opportunities for them to bid on opportunities, contracts, that would encourage them to keep that data updated so you don't have to do this year after year. So it was really in my corporate job where I discovered this opportunity,
the need
for it, and it was really based on my own frustration and the frustration of my team. But then I was thinking beyond that. I was thinking about like all the data that we would be collecting and how valuable that data could be to buyers, companies, suppliers, because we know what enterprise companies are looking for in terms of what they're looking to buy, and we know what their criteria is. We could better match buyers and suppliers, and technology really enables that. And so, so I really kind of thought about it, kind of in stages where first, if I just had this, database where companies could actually search based on what they need, input their criteria and then be matched sort of, find a supplier in a system, and then provide this reporting capability that automated a lot of manual processes. And so it was really me seeing that there were service providers out in the market, software providers, but they were providing pieces of it. So you have to go and buy, this middleware,
Yeah.
And so
Piece something together.
So obviously I thought about this. I mean, I actually thought about this, believe it or not.
Yeah. For how long?
5 years before I
Okay,
actually
gotcha.
started it.
Gotcha.
But what I did, I left Cincinnati Bell in 2005, and I actually started a consulting firm that actually helped, was procurement focused and helping companies in strategic sourcing.
Gotcha. Not just, but not specifically diversity, just
in
general
overall
procurement.
sourcing.
Right. Yeah.
But oftentimes, as they were looking to consolidate their supplier base, they did have purchasing objectives around spending with women, minorities, veterans. And what's interesting, diversity is defined. It's defined differently in different places, like different states. Some states define it based on size. Like we're doing business in 8 countries now at ConnXus, and so
I would imagine that it differs from country to country.
Yeah, it differs from country to country. So our software is configured to define those parameters. So like in the UK, it's more based on ethnicity, but in China, it's based on geography and gender. And so, but our software is configured to adapt to those requirements. In South Africa, obviously, it's more ethnic based. But and that's something I didn't even think about at the time.
Yeah.
Again, this was all I wanted was something that kept my people from doing this manual work, and I want an easy way to find suppliers, and I don't want the data to be stale. That was it.
Right.
But as you start building it and you start getting feedback from customers, you start realizing this is much bigger than you thought it was, and the light bulb came on for me. The light bulb came on for me a lot sooner than this, but it really came on when I met David Cohen from Techstars, who led our Series A round. When he said, what really, he said, this is incredible. Actually, he made kind of being cynical. He made this joke, being sarcastic. He's like, yeah. He said when he saw that we had at the time, let's call it 10% of the Fortune 500 using the platform.
So what time is this? Is this like 2013 or?
Well, this is more current day, and I may be advancing it, but the whole point is his thing was the fact that you guys have attracted these logos at this point is crazy. He said I've never seen this, but the joke was, we see startups like this all the time that have logos like that.
Yeah, that's
so.
right.
But it's really interesting. All it takes is one big one, and if you execute, then
a little bit of a sheeple effect maybe with big brands.
McDonald's was our first one, and
Yeah,
they were
gotcha.
That was like our game changer.
What was that again? 10% of the 10% of the Fortune 500.
Yeah, now I'd say we probably have 10% of the Fortune 500.
That's impressive, man. That's
using
huge.
our that platform.
That's cool. So idea stage, but talk about and launching the consultancy, but you had some extensive domain experience and certainly on your own validating the need, right? But talk about actually figuring out a platform and actually going out and deciding, okay, is this going to be a lifestyle business? Am I going to go get equity funding? Talk about the decision and the decision that you made in terms of how you were going to start the company and thinking about growing it.
I was just talking to somebody about this earlier. It's funny when you lay it out that way, it's hard for me to even fathom, right? All I did was I said, what would the perfect product look like at the time?
Yeah.
And so I really drew it out. Literally, it sounds so cliche, but I really drew it out on a napkin, honestly. And then I transferred it to a piece of paper, obviously. But basically, I sketched what that ideal, what my vision was, what I wanted the product to do, and then I sat on it for a while I was doing the consulting work.
Yeah.
And finally, I came across an old colleague that I worked with in consulting who was, he was an analyst that supported our projects. He was a coder, and he would support us in like these projects where we were doing a lot of, we might be working for a global company and we needed to get through a lot of data quickly. And so he sent me a link to a wine site. He knew I was into wines, and he sent me this wine database that it was a new site that one of our former colleagues had built, and I said, this is exactly what I would want to build. I said, who did this? And so he connected me to our former colleague who I hadn't talked to in years, and he connected me to the programmer that actually did that database.
Gotcha.
And that was really when I said, okay, this is the time for me to do it, because now I saw the output that I wanted.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to him, and obviously I had to, take my sketch and kind of put it in a format that he would understand.
Yeah.
And so I basically created an outline of how I'd want this database to be constructed, and we just
Very
kind of
cool.
worked together on it back and forth. He was in California, I was here in my basement, and that was really the start of it. Just kind of creating this minimum viable product.
Yeah.
And I knew I would be able to get people to test it and
Yeah.
use it. And so that was really the first step, just sort of sketching what I wanted.
Gotcha. How long did that take? Making that connection and having somebody that could help build it out to actually having an MVP? I mean, just out of curiosity.
It took a hell of a long time, and it was a pain, because then I found out later that he wasn't actually doing all the work.
Yeah.
This particular guy, he was using programmers from like Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
So sometimes there was language barriers and talking. And
Yeah.
So it was really, it was a tough process, but definitely got through it. It was supposed to take 4 months.
Yeah.
Probably took 8 months
Gotcha. Yeah.
before it was right.
Right. Gotcha.
So, but all I wanted was I just wanted a working model that I could share with potential
Gotcha.
Potential customers.
In hindsight, you mentioned Techstars and Dave Cohen. Well, before I get to that, when did you connect with Cohen, and how did that come about?
I connected with Cohen. I first met David in 2014. We were doing a Seed Plus round.
Okay, so you're post-revenue, you've got some traction.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we were doing a Seed Plus round, and they participated on the tail end of our Seed Plus round.
Okay.
So I got to know David through Centrifuge,
Okay.
Wendy's relationship with them.
All roads lead to Wendy.
And we actually sat on a panel together downstairs, or at P&G. I think we did the Innovation Day.
Yeah.
And so that's where we first met. But we first met, and there didn't seem to be a lot of interest at the time. But I just stayed in touch and just kept him in the loop as to how we were doing, and
Gotcha.
would oftentimes would maybe ping him, for thoughts on things I was thinking about.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, he's saying, hey, you know what? So how you guys doing? So
Yeah.
I would say, hey, we
Nice.
landed a new customer. I would shoot an email out.
Yeah, just
and one of those emails got
Your own
his
personal
attention.
drip campaign on.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it worked out.
That's cool.
But oftentimes these things all start with relationships.
Yeah.
And so, I can even talk about our earliest, support here locally was, obviously we had angel investors here, but like just sort of institutional money was Cincy was our
Gotcha.
first sort of semi-institutional money.
Gotcha.
And but Mike Venable and I knew each other from, our kids played soccer together.
Oh,
right?
gotcha.
So,
It's all relationships, right?
but yeah, and so it's really interesting when you think back. It's always better to, build relationships before you need something.
That's exactly. That was I remember Brad Feld mentioned that. Well, actually, the same night during FounderCon, he had some good nuggets for the crowd there, and I remember that very well. Building your network before you need it.
I think it's, in fact, one of the young gentlemen was asking me earlier about, how do you know when you need money?
Yeah.
You need outside money. And it was interesting because I wasn't even looking for money when I first started looking for kind of that first institutional money. But I think building those relationships and having, you know, the Mike Venables of the world,
Yeah, right.
who you've already sort of built this relationship with, I think that gives you, you know, surrounding yourself with people like that and others, because you can even, you know, if you want to verify, you can do that. But I think having him, you know, explain to me why you would need it without me even asking, because if you're building a software platform and you're going to be attracting large global companies, you got to have a tight product. Your product's got to be tight.
Yeah.
You got to hire the right people. You got to be able to retain those customers. You know, because we had some early stumbles with some big customers, and if we didn't have the capital, we wouldn't be here. You know, it brings credibility. You know, when we landed our first major customer, McDonald's, it was me and 3 other employees, and we were doing $30,000 in revenue. And so, you know, I'm a man of faith, so I say, you know, it was God, but it was, you know, they had that trust, you know, to take a chance on a startup.
Right.
They didn't know if we were going to be around, but again, you know, I did creative things, right, to get through their financial process. Even though we only had so much cash on our balance sheet, I got letters.
You knew.
Absolutely. I got letters from our investors saying, you know, we'll be willing to back them, blah blah blah. So you got to do some creative things when you're, you know, when you're on the grind, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
And so you have to convince them.
That's interesting.
I had to convince Bob Stewart at McDonald's, you know, Senior VP of North American Supply Chain, that, you know, we're going to be around and you won't regret, you know, working with us. And
taking a chance.
now we're one of their poster children. They love the fact that now they can point to, you know, they asked me to come up and speak, and now they can say, hey, we remember when Rod was just him and 3 employees. Now they got 21 employees, 10 million.
You know,
yeah, so that's the kind of stuff they want. But that's what it's all about. I mean, it's you know, you need more organizations like that who are willing to take a risk on.
That's great. So I know that a lot of folks in here, and a lot of folks in the community, are thinking through all the various options. Like there's and a lot of these weren't around in 2010, right? You think of, you know, you mentioned taking 8 months to get an MVP out, taking 3 years to get some revenue going. In hindsight, would you have gone through an accelerator, or like, you know, if Zoozler was around, you know, a company like that to be able to get your tech built out, or you know, innovation labs around town? You know, you did it all on your own. Any thoughts on, you know, the benefit of those, or in hindsight doing some of that?
That's so funny.
To accelerate things.
You know what? I have to keep it in context, because, you know, it's funny. I got my MBA. I went to Wharton, so now I go back to visit campus and stuff, and I look at all the luxuries that these students have now. I'm like, man, you guys are, you know, wussies, right? But I put it in context. I see the value, definitely see the value, and if I were an entrepreneur now starting, I would definitely use all those resources, use everything at your disposal. But at the same time, I feel like the struggle that we had to raise money, you know, the difficulties that we faced, it just made us better. So I, you know, like, you know, I'm a CPA, and like now you can use calculators for CPA exam, but we couldn't use calculators when I took the exam.
Right.
But you know, but I value that. I'm like, man, you know, I had to do an amortization schedule, you know, by hand. So I think that, like, use everything at your disposal. Like, I certainly use everything at my disposal at the time, but I think whatever you are lacking, it's either gonna help, it's gonna propel you, or if you're not cut out for it, you're probably gonna stumble and give up. But I think that use whatever's at your disposal. I just did what I had to do. Somebody asked me about it earlier, and I said I didn't really think about it that way. I just something I didn't know. I just picked up the phone and called somebody.
Just did it.
Right? I was like, heck, if my grandfather used to manage his inventory by hand, you know, we shouldn't complain. We got a lot more luxuries now. That's my philosophy. So I think the resources that are here now, man, that's fantastic. Whatever you lack, just you know, I think you know you'll look back on the next wave of entrepreneurs and you'll say, man, they got it easy.
That's right. That's
So
right.
I just think it's
You could 3D
everything
print
is
a company
it's
now,
all
right?
I think it's all relative, right? I mean,
Yeah. Gotcha. So you digging into and then kind of moving into some of the challenges that you mentioned. Talk about customers. You know, your initial customers. Maybe some of the maybe digging into whatever you're comfortable sharing. Digging into some of those stumbles and maybe how some of those made you stronger and the learnings from those stumbles, but also potentially finding the right customers and potentially having to turn down business or maybe fire customers.
Yeah.
Talk about all that.
Well, I think that all customers are not the best customers, the best first customers, right?
Got it.
We were really fortunate that McDonald's was that first customer for us, first major customer, because we had some stumbles, you know, and we started attracting bigger companies sooner than we expected. You know, as an entrepreneur, you know, oftentimes you'll sell vaporware. Honestly, I mean, you'll sell before you can deliver it, right? So, and we had some of that, and so some of that started to show itself.
Yeah.
It was more from a standpoint of deadline. So a lot of the things that even in our platform that are automated now, and that our vision was to always automate them. Some things we had to do manually before we couldn't scale it right away, but we had to do stuff manually. You know, behind the curtain, right? Man, this is awesome. They didn't realize that we had a horse and buggy, right? But that's but that's what you had to do. So we had a lot of manual processes that we had to deal with, and it showed up in our quality, and my contact at McDonald's pulled me aside, and we still great friends today, and he said when we asked to put that date out there, you didn't have to accept that. You could have. We didn't need it September 9th. I mean, you could have said September. So that's first lesson. Just be honest. Just be authentic. Don't overpromise. And that's something that we learned from on that first one.
Yeah.
And then also we learned that certain customers just won't respond right away. Certain customers that you may target may take you longer to get in the door. Like I was just talking with Kathy earlier. Like between her and John Pepper, who are both early investors in our company, introducing us. Mel Healy. And it took us 3 years to get into P&G.
Yeah.
Penetrate the fortress.
That's right.
And P&G asked me to speak on this at one of their conferences, and just to tell the real deal, like the struggle of an entrepreneur trying to do business with them. And their treasurer made a comment.
3 years.
She's like, yeah, it should not have taken 3 years. We're so happy that you're sharing that, because now we can learn from it, how to be better.
Yeah.
And but again, I'm glad that we waited. I'm glad it was stalled, because I think we're a much better partner to P&G now.
Yeah.
And they're a much better partner to us, given where
Gotcha. If it were like a 6-month thing and you got the business like 2 years earlier,
we may have failed. We may have let them down. So
Gotcha.
Again, I try to look at find the silver lining in everything, right? I mean, that was
or at least
everything
learning,
happens
right?
for a reason. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So on that topic of enterprise, I had heard Daryl share this with me, and as an aside, so Daryl, some big business going on, some big deals going on, which business comes first. We certainly wouldn't want you to jeopardize the success of the business based on being here. So Daryl had to stay back and handle some of these big deals coming down the pipe. So we totally understand that, but. He shared with me a mantra that you guys use, and I'd love for you to unpack that and dig into that. It's execute like an enterprise, but operate like a startup.
Absolutely.
Talk about what that means, not only now, but how that's evolved from early stage to scale stage where you are right now.
Well, it's interesting, because one of the great things that Daryl brings, I think you have to find, when you build your team, people that complement your skill set. And so Daryl brings skills that I don't have, and totally complements, my skill set. And, really just couldn't ask for a better partner. And I think it's, getting beyond, like, for example, like I used to, in the early days, I couldn't even go on vacation. Like I wasn't comfortable going on vacation. Sure. I would, we had customers who specifically wanted to talk to Rod.
Yeah.
And it took a while for them to get comfortable with me being sort of not involved in the day-to-day. And it was really Daryl who actually was a great catalyst for that in intercepting that. Like he was adamant about, you're not gonna have to fly in to do this presentation. You know what I mean? Enjoy your vacation. We gotta, it can't be the Rod show forever.
Right.
And that's where it was a transition for me, being involved in every single detail, day to day. But when you bring on a capable CEO with a lot of capacity, you have to learn when to let go. There's certain things you got to let go of, and you just have to. It's not easy, but you have to do it, because, like, I look at where we are now, and had I not let go of certain things, there's no freaking way we'd be where we are now.
Gotcha.
And I credit Daryl for that, and we built a great team, and the yin and yang, right?
Right.
I mean, it's been a great combination, and that's how we stay entrepreneurial. So like now it frees me up to do things like this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. 7 years ago I would have had to stay on the call,
Thank you,
right? Right. I would have had to stay on the call. I would have been involved in that call, but now, I can focus on thought leadership. And one of the things I'm doing now, one of my New Year's kind of resolutions is I want to spend a lot of time with our top 10 customers, and start thinking about not the ConnXus platform of 2 years out or 3 years out or 4 years out, but like 10 years from now.
Right.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
Will there be a chief procurement officer that we're selling to? That title may change just based on some of the things that are happening, and how do we incorporate blockchain into our platform?
Yeah.
And things like that. So I can start thinking about that, and then we got a lot of great partnerships on the horizon. So I think unpacking sort of, it's just like thinking globally and acting locally, right? I mean, again, we're doing business in 8 countries now, but we have to respond, and we have to stay ahead of the customer. Yeah. We have to continue to improve our product, add features and functionality. We want to be where the market is going. We don't want to chase the market.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I think that's important. And that's one of the fears that I have. My biggest fear is that someone else is ready to disrupt us tomorrow. Yeah, and right. We can't let that happen. So we have to continue to.
The disruptor becomes the disrupted pretty
absolutely
quickly, right?
Yeah.
But before we'll dig more into the future here, and then we'll do some Q&A. But the common thread between every founder that I talk to, at least one that has a family, is just personal lives, balancing all that stuff. So digging into that a little bit, I've heard a story where you were at a meeting or an event, and I think it was maybe at your house or somebody's house, and your wife was there, and you were so focused on what was going on, you didn't get up from the table all day long, except for when your wife needed something, or when there was a question there, you're right there. So and I've heard other stories from other folks that
darn Skippy, right?
That when I asked to describe Daryl to me, I hear things like polished, genuine, all those good things. But I think every one of them has said, and he loves his wife,
Absolutely.
Loves his wife.
Yep.
So take us through those conversations that you had launching this with her, and also your kids too, and how those evolved in terms of expectations and that level of tolerance and understanding throughout the way.
Well, it's funny. My wife, I mean, we've been married for 25 years, but we knew each other 8 years before that. Okay. We actually dated in high school for a year, and then sort of went away, and then remained friends. So we were friends for 8 years before we ever got married. Gotcha. So it was really, it's almost like when we got married, you know, it was like you're marrying your best friend, right? And so
Yeah.
she knew what she was getting. Like when we got married,
You're a known quantity.
yeah, I mean, she knew that I was, you know, we got married in '92, and in '93 I quit my job and went back to business school.
Yeah.
So, and she knew that. So she worked while I was in school, and so she knew that I was, you know, somewhat risky. You know, I wasn't risk averse, right?
You were in a risk, but you were at
Yeah.
a risk.
Yeah, I had a high risk profile. Risk tolerance was pretty high, right? So, so she knew what she was getting, and she's always, you know, I always shared my dreams with her. You know,
Yeah.
things that I, you know, would hope to do. You know, at one point, you know, I thought maybe I would make a run at like a corporate career and maybe become a CFO or CEO or something. And but then I always kind of had that entrepreneurial bug. You know, thought about different ideas, but nothing really stuck over, you know, over the years.
Right.
And but when it really came down to me sort of, you know, really leaving my job and starting like that first consulting business, it really wasn't a lot of, not too much fear there, because when you're starting a consulting practice, you know, if you've been in consulting and you got some clients lined up, it's a little bit different because it was just me, and then I had a partner, and then we had some contractors that we would use for projects. So that's a little different. Like you don't really have anybody relying on you. But when it was like starting a software company, that's a lot different.
Yep.
That's when like I started like got to a point where I was like draining my savings. So that's a different, you know. So having that you know, those early conversations about actually doing it, no problem. I'm behind you 100%. You know, when times got tough, you know, it started getting questionable when, you know, I had to like go home like for the, you know, umpteenth time and say,
Make another withdrawal.
we're not gonna get paid this month, and by the way, company needs to borrow some money.
That's right. That's right.
So, you know, when you have to like make that withdrawal to make payroll and you know, borrow from the 401k and all that kind of stuff, that's when it kind of, you know, your relationship gets tested.
Yeah.
And you know, hitting the, you know, what you have set aside for your kids' college, things like that.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my daughter got a great merit scholarship.
I was gonna say.
Still have the right, still end up writing a lot of, still write checks, but
That's right. If it's,
But,
it's an art school, man,
yeah.
you're still writing checks. Man.
still write checks, leather and all that stuff. But
Oh yeah.
but clearly, like, I think the foundation of our relationship was such that, you know, she just believed in me. I believed in me, and she realized that I believed in it, so she believed in it. We didn't share like a whole lot with the kids, but my son interned with us, like before he went to college, and I did one of these events in our office for someone, and he actually heard me talk about stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so my wife told me, she said, Mom, I didn't know, like Dad was saying that there were times when like he wasn't getting a paycheck and you guys were like living on savings and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, he was like really shocked. I mean, he couldn't believe it. She said his face was just, he couldn't, you know, so I think he even gained kind of a different perspective on that, on entrepreneurship. Sure. But, so we didn't really share a lot with him. Now I look back on it and say, well, maybe we should have, but maybe it's good that it came out that way.
Yeah.
I said, man, Mom and Dad are good actors.
Yeah, right. Good poker face.
Yeah, but yeah, we had, but I'll tell you, I mean, there were times, I mean, you know, we had some struggles, and we had to deal with it.
Sure.
And fortunately we did, because those are the things that can really, you know, ruin a marriage.
Yeah, no kidding.
You know, money issues.
Plenty of stories around the ecosystem where things haven't worked out as well. So a couple questions on the future, and then we'll turn it over to you guys to get your questions. So talk about, you alluded to this before about, you know, the future of diversity, and I think I shared with you before that I had seen some stats where 2025, minorities today are not going to be the minorities of
Yeah.
Just in terms of population growth.
Yep.
Are not going to be the minorities of 2025. And even talking about locally here, there's a lot of, I get the sense that things are happening and there's a lot of activity with, this new Hillman Accelerator that's, minority and women led, which is exciting. Stay tuned, that comes out next month. And then this, Vision should know the event at the end of the month. That's all about diversity.
Future
Vision.
Histories Now.
Yeah, it's Future History Now. There's things happening, but kind of give us your assessment locally of what's going on, what's working, what's not working, and then talk, future as well.
I mean, I think that I'm very hopeful. I'm seeing a lot of, what I've seen over the last like 10 years here around the ecosystem. I think it's fantastic. I think Cincinnati is well positioned to be a leader, from a inclusion perspective. But it's interesting when you think about, like, we call it, supplier diversity, but like in the UK and parts of Europe, other parts of Europe, like inclusive procurement is kind of the way it's viewed. And when I look at our business and how it was kind of founded and kind of our initial, push into the market around supplier diversity, when you think about just the business landscape in the U.S., there's, call it 28 million businesses. 99% of those businesses are small businesses. There's very few like really multi-billion dollar businesses. But that 99%, when you look at, if you take 60% of that, 65% of that, those are either minority or woman-owned businesses. So when you think about small business, by default, you're basically hitting, when you think about minority business, you're really hitting small business, and that's really what it's all about. Yeah. And so I view this as, as our business model continues to evolve, I knew the demographic shift was taking place. And that's why, as we kind of build out our platform, we wanted to build that platform to enable customers to configure it in whatever way made sense for them. Like, some states would use the platform and they can define diversity. We have all the categories, in our system, whether it be based on size according to the SBA requirements. But I think what's important is that companies are able to sort of define what's important to them if it's buying locally. So some companies would prioritize, like we have some customers who prioritize, diversity, but then there's also a local element. So a lot of companies want to impact their local market.
Sure.
And
understandable.
And that might be higher priority than diversity nationally. It's like, how do I impact my local market? And so the way I really see that being defined is I think it's going to be more focused on economic impact. So companies are looking at diversity in a way now that says, okay, Rod Inc. is minority owned, but they're based in Mason, Ohio. But Todd Inc. is based in over the Rhine. So, and Todd's got a very diverse employee base. Even though he owns the company, he's employing 500 people in over the Rhine. I'm just making up numbers. So the economic impact of working with Todd, who's really having a greater impact than Rod in Mason, Ohio, employing 100 people, right? Much higher economic impact. And that's, in fact, and the reason I say that is because we have, one of our products is, we actually have economic impact reporting. So we can tell McDonald's that the $30 million that they're spending in Greater Chicago, and this is based on the data that we're already collecting for other things that we provide. The $30 million that they spend in Greater Chicago is spent with 55 diverse suppliers that employ 4,400 people at wage rates that are 150% above, subsistence level. Yeah. And so, obviously that's data they can incorporate in their in marketing, and they can incorporate that into, if they're dealing with, issues where they're, we had one customer that use that data, similar data, in a market where they were doing layoffs, but they were showing that their year-over-year spend with suppliers in that market was going up. So I think it's going to be, in the future, it's going to be more focused on economic impact, which is what it should,
Right.
which is what it
Makes
is
sense.
now.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, I think you'll see, and this is something else we're pulling in as well, like supplier ratings, performance ratings, but then we're also, sustainability is something we're pulling in data around suppliers being LEED certified and their environmental factors, sustainability ratings. So not only the performance ratings and the diversity information, but also quality ratings.
Gotcha. Excuse me. That's interesting. So just a last question, then we'll turn it up to you guys, because I know that you guys have a ton of questions, but talk about fundraising, and there's probably going to be other questions about fundraising. So pretty good success, man. 9.2 million, right?
Yep.
In the past,
Yep.
well, in the past really 3 years or so, right? Because you didn't.
Yeah.
It's only been,
Well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So since, we've been around since 2010, didn't sell product to 2013, but raised a total of 9.2. It took us 3 years to raise that first 4.
Gotcha.
so it was,
Gotcha. Late bloomer.
It trickled in, right? It was a trickle. So we could never plan further than our nose, or we couldn't plan 6 months out.
Gotcha.
And so that was kind of a seed plus.
How much was that you being decisive on? Because we talked about that before. About I think you're one of the most decisive founders in terms of vetting out funding sources, not only the who, but where, and how that affects how you grow your company. Was that some of the delays or some of the timing? Or?
No, it was. I think frankly, we just. I think some of the delays were just based on not finding the right investor.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up having to do, fortunately, we had a great foundation of early investors who were willing to continue to back the company, but we were trying to get to close the Series A round where the company gets valued by someone independently. So what happened was we ended up having to, because we were showing the right progress, we just kept running into hurdles. It was kind of like when you're raising trying to raise an A round, and it's like, okay, yeah, you need to be at about $500,000. So when you get there, it's like, okay, well, you need to be at about $750,000.
Yeah, right.
So you keep the carrot keeps getting dangled in front of you, and so we just needed to find the right investor. So I think now we did walk away from a term sheet and from a VC that will remain nameless. Yeah. And it was just you could have gotten better at a check cashing store. Right.
Gotcha.
But terms were horrible. So we could do that because we had a core group of investors who said, you know what, we'll just do another bridge. And so just really we weren't willing to compromise our values in that way, and it would have hurt our other investors, and it wasn't a good deal. But it was interesting because we had learned to struggle and almost kind of bootstrap it because you put these projections together based on you raising a certain amount of money, but like you could never get to it because you're gonna run out of money. So it's like, well, we probably shouldn't spend that because we might. And so that was a struggle. Yeah. So finally, as we kind of got wind underneath our sails and really became attractive to the Techstars of the world and others, we were able to put together. I mean, we were only looking to raise 3, and but then we ended up raising 5. Yeah. We actually ended up being oversubscribed because we had a New York investor who wanted to join in the round. And then we had existing investors who wanted to invest more, and so we were fortunate. But to raise $5 million, it all went in the account at one time, and that was just different for us.
Right.
So now we have enough runway, we could actually plan, we could actually grow the business and not worry about where payroll's gonna come from. And I don't have to go home, Daryl and I don't have to go and say, okay, how much can you put in and whatever. And so, so yeah, I mean, it's great now to be, it's almost like when that was done, it's kind of like, you ever study like really hard for finals and then all of a sudden you're done and you're like, oh man, what am I gonna do now?
Yeah.
So now, yeah, I mean, that was the position we were in. It was really different, but we still try to run the business, manage the business, and manage our cash just like we did before we had it.
That's smart. That's smart.
And so yeah, I mean, we're sitting on a lot of cash and we're generating revenue and excited about our future prospects.
Well, again, that was only one question on fundraising. I'm sure there's a lot more questions on fundraising. I'll shut up for a little bit and turn it over to the crowd. We don't have a microphone today, so I can't do the Donahue thing, but just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Anybody have any questions for Rob?
Sure, Rob. Here's a quick question to start. How do you identify the profile of the right investor when you are in a vulnerable position?
Good question.
Man,
Competitive market?
honestly, some of it's just luck.
Can you repeat the question?
He asked, like, how do you identify the right profile of an investor? So I think, well, first, definitely had a lot of help from people around here, right? So just getting introduced to Techstars and even some of our seed investors. I think that that formed the foundation, right? Because now that they're in it and we fit their profile, they know other investors. There are other investors in their network that also invest in companies like ours, right? SaaS. What's interesting, we have investors that focus on SaaS, which we are. We have investors that focus on impact, which we are. We have investors that focus on software, which we are. Mm-hmm. And so all those things taken together,
You check a lot of boxes.
we check a lot of boxes. So by having those investors in your network already, it's automatically going to expand your network beyond them to their networks. And so that was really it. So like the Social Entrepreneurs Fund out of New York is an investor now. They invest in our A round, and that's a fund that's, was founded by Bill Ackman, who's a hedge fund billionaire, who maybe you heard of, and he has an impact fund. So he wants to invest in companies that are like solving big problems and changing the world, but delivering big returns. But it's because one of our existing investors from seed is an LP in Bill's fund. And so he said, yeah, you guys are ready for TCEF. And so TCEF, they did their due diligence and said, oh, we want in, and we want a, minimum $1 million, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, oh, come on. And so, so I think if you surround yourself with the right investors early on, that's going to lead to, just like surround yourself with A players and they'll introduce you to other A players. Mm-hmm. In the case of us, surrounding ourselves with the right investors early on, it just worked.
Viral effect.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's the way I look at it. It wasn't like I really didn't go down. Like I would talk to anybody, but I could tell like first 15 minutes if it's going, if it's likely a fit. Right. Like, a couple times I was like, can I just leave now? But I didn't do that. But no, every experience was a worthy experience because you learn from it. Someone beats up your presentation or whatever. You take it back and you improve it, and we learn and move on.
Yeah, gotcha. What else? Jason.
What drove the kind of the courage and conviction to expand your vision? So you had a really good initial product. So when did you know it was time that we got to double down and expand this thing and push it forward?
Really, customers hearing it from the market, it was really coming from our customers. And, frankly, I was happy when that started to happen because the only reason, like certain things I won't say on a recorded line, but
We can pause
but
the
like
camera for a little
I
bit.
knew there was some opportunity, some white space in the let's just say in the procurement software space, but I wouldn't dare come out of the gate trying to compete with some of those larger players.
Sure.
So I knew if I focused on an area that is underserved, then I could expand from there, kind of a snowball. But once we, once we kind of used that wedge to get in, then customers started saying, oh man, this is better than such and such. Wow, we could use you guys to do all, to manage all of our suppliers. And so that's really what led to it. It was really customers. And fortunately, like just having the right team, like Daryl, is really good at listening to customers and responding, right? And we bring it back and say, okay, we need to add this, but we would only add it if other customers would benefit from it, if we could scale it. So really, it was customers that drove us to expand.
Great.
And it worked out because that was part of the vision, but it's nice when the customer does it. Like I wanted to be, I wanted to be global, but we couldn't just come out of the gate. But
Drove you that way.
it was a customer that took us. Cummins took us into 6 countries,
cool.
7 countries.
What else?
Yeah.
Andrew.
You mentioned how you and Daryl really mesh well together. How did you find him as a partner? How did that process go, kind of vetting and learning?
Yeah, that's interesting. So Daryl and I, Mason, I first met him when he was an executive at Exotica, but really didn't connect the dots. And then we went to the same barbershop, so we would meet each other, see each other in the barbershop.
Gotcha.
And then my family, we used to all take Taekwondo. His son and me, my wife, and my son and daughter were all in the same Taekwondo. We started Taekwondo at the same time. So then we'd see each other there.
Gotcha.
And so it was just one of those things where we would see each other. And then I saw him, I was actually in my little tiny office. It was CMC Properties
Oh yeah.
in Mason.
Quite the.
And
quite
he was
the
thinking about moving to Chile with Luxottica, where he was an executive. He was going to relocate and his family, but he wasn't sure. And he was taking Spanish. He was taking intensive Spanish, and he saw me. What are you doing here? And I explained what I was doing and blah blah blah. He said, "Oh, let's get together and talk." So we'd actually get together. We actually started getting together over cigars
Yeah. There you go.
and talking about it. And then he ended up actually investing in the company. And then I asked him to come in and meet with my COO at the time, who I knew at some point would probably want to go back into retirement.
Right.
And he consulted with us for a couple months. And then after that, it was just kind of one thing led to another. And,
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So just another one of those relationships where, you never know where you end up.
That's cool.
He decided not to go to Chile.
Gotcha. You guys get the same haircut too, don't you, at the barber? Right?
Well, now I don't go to the barbershop anymore.
Okay.
I decided to, I'd save that money. I'd just buy me
There you go. There you go.
a good razor.
Good razor, there
And
you
so,
go.
yeah, so as you can see, low maintenance.
Anything else? Yep.
So you said you had no revenue for the first 3 years. Did you go all into the business from the start, or was there a point where you were still consulting and then decided to go all in?
Yeah. I went all in as soon as I took money from Cincy Tech. That was kind of a requirement. Yeah. That was really it. But, it was consuming so much of my time anyway that I couldn't do it anymore. But yeah, I was all in. Even prior to that, I was pretty much all in. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, tough decision.
Yeah. David, we'll make this last question and okay, we'll do 2 more questions. David.
Like your first big deal was with McDonald's, you said?
Yeah.
That's all right. There's 2 Davids. That's all right. You're important as well,
I got
man.
time. Don't worry. I got time.
All right.
I think that's the same, actually the same question. So McDonald's question, right?
So, well,
Gotcha.
see how it goes from here. My question was, how did you land that? You know,
That's literally the exact same question.
That's funny.
So, you know, the way we landed McDonald's is, it's funny. I still remember this. I was on vacation in Disney World.
Oh, you told
my
me a little
family.
about this. Yeah, you told me.
Yeah, I was on vacation, and I got a call. I don't know if it was a call or an email, but anyway, there was a consultant working for McDonald's, and said that they had been hired to search the market for solutions like ours. You know, even with some vaporware, right? Like solutions like ours, and they were having an RFP. They needed to collect some data. They were getting ready to put an RFP together, and they wanted to invite us to respond to it. So really, that was the start of it. We responded to the RFP.
Did you
We were
cancel your
notified.
vacation and jump on a plane
No,
right
no,
back? or-
no. This was that was a year before we got it.
Okay.
That was a year before we got it. So
Alright.
that was a long process, right? And so we got the RFP. We ended up responding to the RFP. There was a lot of interim steps in the process. Like we had to give them like a little sandbox to play in, like just to pre-qualify us, right? And then probably 7 months later, we were notified that after jumping through some hoops, we were notified that we were one of the finalists, and we, needed to be in Oak Brook, Illinois, on a certain date, a certain time, and basically, the rest is history. I was sick as a dog. I had the flu, and so I was riding, had a suit on, riding. Sue was driving, had the chair recline, and then my sales guy Josh was in the back seat, and got there, found the energy, and just connected with them, and they said, one thing we gotta be honest with you about, this would you guys don't meet our risk profile, but so this is something that we'd have to get comfortable with if you were to be successful, right, in being
That's
selected.
funny.
So, but we got it.
Fair
and
risk profile.
so I can ask them all those questions now.
Yeah.
What made you guys do it?
That's right.
But it was like they said we saw the passion.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wasn't about the platform, wasn't about the tech. It was the.
No, they believed that.
Yeah.
They saw what we could be, not what we were at the time.
Cool.
But we had to convince them of that. And I was even thinking about not going. My team was saying, you know what, if you don't want to go, I think that would have been a
It's
big
pretty
mistake.
impressive to project that passion when you're sick as a dog. That's
Hey,
pretty good.
you know, I thought about it. I was going to Chicago. Driving through Chicago. I was like, man, Michael Jordan. What year was that?
That's right. Had the
Shoot,
flu.
jump. He had the flu. I was like,
right.
hey, I got to deliver.
That's right, man.
If I do nothing else,
remember that
hey,
game.
before
I remember
if I'm
watching
if I'm gonna die, let me die after this.
I'm a big Jordan fan. I definitely remember that.
Yeah, let's land this baby first.
That's right. I have one over here.
Okay, thank you. How has public policy or healthcare hindered your business growth?
Public policy, like this crazy stuff going on in Washington right now. It's interesting. I'm gonna write a blog on this. So I've been getting
Good, you should.
I've been getting a lot
I'd read
of
it.
questions about how do you think the new new administration blah 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 it will impact supplier diversity, minority businesses, and frankly, I think it's helping our business. And the reason I say that is because like even some of the discussions I'm having and like some of the partnerships that we're going, starting to implement now, like I think this whole movement around supplier diversity, minority business development was really, government was a catalyst. So you think back to the 60s and 70s, it was the government really leading corporate, but corporate started to really surpass government probably 20 years ago. So now, I think we're at a point now where, for the first time in probably a couple decades, corporate is more progressive than government. So if you look at, the state of Ohio, like Governor Kasich had
Yeah.
mandates in the state of Ohio they hit their goals for the first time, and spending with, diverse businesses.
Right, yeah.
15% goal, and they're going to raise it. I've been talking to some folks with the governor's office and looking at some potential partnerships there, and it's going to be even more aggressive in the years to come. So I think it's actually a good thing because I think now people want to prove, because the demographics are the demographics, and at the end of the day, you want to sell your product, and if your customers look like me or her or him, you just want to sell, right? So this is a business imperative that's not just driven by the need to meet, a compliance goal or objective, but it's a market issue. Like, companies want to be able to market the fact that, women made these products. We had actually, 4 women-owned businesses like millennials now who are starting to, be in the supply chain and control the supply chain. They care about where things come from. They care about who
Why are you
makes
doing
it.
what you're doing?
They're looking at the greater good. So our business is not going to suffer at all. And I think companies are going to probably do more to prove that we don't. That's not us.
Yeah, right.
Right. So I think it's going to be great. And I always believe that if you build a great product and you deliver with flawless execution, everything else will just come. That's
Good deal.
my humble opinion.
Anything else? Other questions? I'll just end with, go ahead.
I'm just curious, if you're willing to share this, but how much did you spend on your initial development of the MVP?
The initial?
8 months worth.
Wow, that was back in 2011, 2012.
Yeah, the question was asked how much he invested in his own money of building the MVP.
So that original MVP, I think it was like $8,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah.
Pretty low.
6 years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably $8,000. Well, there were some more expenses around it. I mean, I probably end up spending total, 12 when you think about some of the other things that I had to make up for. Some of the rework and all that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the original quote. Well, it probably ended up being like 12 for the original.
Good question.
Because there's some things that lag behind, so yeah.
So if no other questions, I'll ask you one last one. What's been your best moment so far with ConnXus?
The best moment? Man, that's tough. Because I would say, I want to say raising a Series A, completing that was huge.
But you felt every nickel, man.
Yeah,
every
I mean, it was nice to get that done because I just, for so long it was, such a struggle and not knowing where the next dollar's coming from.
Yeah.
And, having those, now we got, 21 employees. Like the one thing I think about is like I got 21 families that rely on.
Yeah.
If I can't get this done, man, that's 21 families that, relying on this raise being successful. And so that's probably the greatest because it's enabled us to really focus on executing the vision.
Gotcha.
That's probably the next one would be, being recognized as one of the best places to work. I mean, because that's important. Like having, like we got a great team, and it's just great to have.
You've been very intentional about building culture. And
and that's just that's really important to have an environment where our employees feel free to bring their kids to work, real family environment, and but raising up. But again, getting that round done, that makes it all possible, right?
Yep. Cool.
So.
Good to know. Well, thank you very much. Conversation's been awesome. Love the interview.
Yeah.